Good afternoon. My name is Lindsey Flondro, and today I'll be presenting my research about body position and eye contact in autistic and neurotypical infants. This research is done in the Bama Baby Lab here at the University of Alabama under the direction of Dr. Kelsey West and Malerie McDowell in the Department of Psychology. So in the Bama Baby Lab, we study infants ages 12 to 48 months, focusing on development within the various domains of learning. We propose that all domains of learning are related, and they unfold in a developmental cascade. A developmental cascade is the idea that one change in development can have a domino effect on many different areas. My peers and I study several developmental cascades, including motor skills and language, how infants learn emotions, how sibling interactions influence development, and several others. Most importantly, we study these cascades in both autistic and neurotypical infants. We refer to autistic infants as children who have scored above the autism cutoff on the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule by a clinician. The ADOS is a standardized diagnostic test that uses structured and semi-structured tasks in order to diagnose. The infant also must have scored above the autism threshold on the Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers, a parent questionnaire administered by research staff. A neurotypical child is a child who has not been diagnosed with autism or another neurodivergent disorder. Signs of autism can appear as early as 12 months into development. The earliest indications include delayed language or a delay in the babbling or vocalization of a child, as well as a slower pace of word learning later on. Another indication is a delayed onset for crawling or walking for the child. But how do these characteristics influence development? Here, we describe that an infant's motor behaviors, how they move their bodies, affects what babies see, and what babies see influences the words they learn. Therefore, we propose that eye contact between a child and their caregiver can have a direct influence on their development. Now, studies have shown that when performing screen-based tasks, autistic toddlers tend to look at faces less often than neurotypical children do. Screen-based tasks include remote eye tracking, which is when infants are seated in a chair and shown screen-based stimuli like pictures or movies, while the eye tracker records the location of their gaze on the screen. However, little is known about autistic toddlers' real-world visual attention. Screen-based measures only capture toddlers' attention to pictures or movie clips, but in real life, toddlers are consistently moving about, exploring their surroundings and selecting which people, toys, objects, and pets to attend to. The options for where to look and how to move about are simply endless. Therefore, head-mounted eye trackers allow researchers to gain a better understanding of infants' vision in real life. These helmet-like tools allow researchers to record both the baby's field of vision and their eye movement so we can articulate exactly where in the world the infant is looking for exactly how long. This does not interfere with the baby's movement. Therefore, we're able to study how posture and other motor skills may affect their field of vision as the baby moves about naturally. The eye trackers are from the company Positive Science and record exact gaze direction through two small cameras, one that records the visual scene and one that records the infant's right eye, both of which are embedded into a fitted cap. After the experiments, the videos are imported to Positive Science Yarbus software, which calculates precise location of gaze for each video frame using estimates of pupil and corneal reflection from the eye video. This gives us the opportunity to measure precise attention on a frame-by-frame basis to gain a true understanding of how infants allocate their attention during natural, unbothered play. The only current study to measure eye contact or to measure attention in autistic toddlers by head-mounted eye tracking found no differences in face looking between autistic and neurotypical children. Both groups looked at caregivers' faces less than 1% of the time. So what explains these discrepant findings? One possibility is that motor difficulty influences toddlers' face viewing. If glancing at a face requires motor effort, like repositioning their body or having to move to a different area of the room, then perhaps all toddlers, no matter their neurocognitive status, are less likely to view faces. But when viewing faces requires little to no motor effort, then differences between autistic and neurotypical infants are likely to emerge. In fact, previous studies found that infants' face looking differs depending on the context of play as well. Autistic infants looked at faces less in games of tickling rather than neurotypical infants, but performed similar face viewing when just simply playing with toys. Thus, face looking is likely influenced not only by neurocognitive status, but by many other situational factors as well. In our study specifically, we are including 15 infants on the autism spectrum, 15 neurotypical infants, and their primary caregivers. We prioritize recruiting a racially and ethnically diverse group of infants from across the state of Alabama. At the start of each session, the eye tracker will be placed on the child and the caregiver. As you can see, we have the caregiver eye tracker, the infant eye tracker. The caregiver looks more so like a pair of glasses, whereas the infant one is the cap that we put on the infants. And then we will also set up a third-person camera that shows the body position of the child in relation to the caregiver. So in the first session, toddlers and their caregivers will play for 5 minutes in 3 different contexts. In the easy motor position, meaning eye contact is possible by a simple glance. Next, in medium, meaning the infant can turn his or her head to make eye contact. And lastly, in the difficult position, where the infant must shift their entire body to make eye contact. And next, toddlers and their caregivers will play freely for 10 minutes, where we instruct them to play as they typically would if they were at home. When the session's complete, we'll split the data into 5-second increments and score motor difficulty within each of those increments. After each session, the videos are imported into data view. Here's an example of how the data appears when it's imported. You can see the child's point of view, the parent's point of view, as well as the interaction view, which shows their body position in relation to each other. Lastly, parents will complete questionnaires on REDCap. These include the MacArthur-Bates Communicative Development Inventory, a questionnaire that asks from a set of words which words the infant can speak or understand, as well as behavior and motor history questionnaires. Using this data, we have 2 specific aims to analyze. First, how does body position and eye contact differ between autistic and neurotypical infants? There are 3 possible outcomes. First, when faces are easy to view, autistic toddlers may look less than neurotypical peers. This would reinforce that differences in autistic toddlers' attention are related to how they're positioned in the movement and their position of body. Second, autistic toddlers may look at faces less no matter what. This would reaffirm findings from screen-based tasks that we've discussed earlier. And finally, maybe autistic and neurotypical toddlers rarely look at faces because they're mainly looking at their hands, the toys, and the surroundings during play. This would educate us that eye contact interventions may not be as imperative for development as we currently believe. Our second aim is to build an openly shared data set of eye gaze among autistic toddlers during free play. With parental consent, we can share this data collected from this project on Databury, an NIH-funded database available to researchers at IRB-approved institutions. Head-mounted eye tracking is relatively new to developmental research. Thus, by creating and sharing this video dataset, other researchers can utilize this to test research questions about real-world attention in autism without having to physically collect the data themselves. We are passionate about our research given the apparent role of face looking for communication, language, emotional development, and education. Although many intervention approaches attempt to increase face looking in autistic toddlers, it's unclear whether such attempts are necessary. Thus, better understanding face looking in naturalistic contexts will inform us of the best intervention practices for improving the development of autistic toddlers. Thank you so much for listening. Here are my sources, and I will now open the floor to any questions.
Hey, I really liked the part where you had, or I thought it was very interesting when you were talking about the eye trackers. Are there times that when y'all are working with the babies that they don't really want that, they get fussy whenever you try to put the eye trackers on, and if they're acting up trying to put them on, is there anything that y'all would or what do you do to respond in that
Yes,
case?
absolutely. So we kind of have this 80-20 rule where in that age range that we're working with, it's between 1 and 3 years old. There's a lot of times that the infants just don't like the head-mounted eye trackers. And in that case, if let's say the infant throws a tantrum, they're just not really cooperating, we'll let them calm down, we'll try to put it back on, and if it's not cooperating, we kind of just have to abort mission in that case. And knowing that there's about 20% of our infants that come in that we can't really use that data just because they're not really cooperating. But it's kind of the same thing as an infant in a snowsuit, where at first they're like, what is this? I'm not really used to this, but then after a couple minutes, they're more accustomed to the feeling of it on their head. We also, in our lab, created these fake eye trackers, which we can give to parents to bring home with them at least like a week before they come in for a study, so that at home the infant is used to that feeling of something being on their head already, so that once they come into our lab, they're more used to that feeling and therefore better adjusted for the study itself.
So I heard you mention a little bit earlier about the specific criteria for like autism diagnosis, and I know that sometimes it can be a little bit hard to diagnose autism, especially at that early of an age. So I'm curious if you maybe work with infants that are like suspected to have autism, or if you guys are like just strictly just they have to have autism.
Yes, absolutely. So in order to keep our study consistent, infants that are in that autism group must have the autism spectrum diagnosis criteria, that ADOS criteria, as well as a few other studies as well, just to keep our data consistent. But between the ages of 2 and 3, a lot of the times the parents would already know if the infant had autism because of those certain delays and certain symptoms of autism that you can see very early on. And I know that the symptoms of autism are very different in many different children. A lot of the times they'll excel in one domain but are a bit behind in others. Let's say they don't necessarily speak as much as they should, or maybe their motor skills are lacking. So we really need those criteria and need that diagnosis for them to comply with our lab study.